Why did Pierre leave Iran in tears? What does your perspective of a country look like through the lens of its government? And why does it quickly become true that relationships are the only things that matter? If you'd like to find out, then you're in the right place. Welcome to Between Views. I'm your host, Alec Koski. This podcast aims to cast light on and connect you with inspirational people, identify them as potential mentors in your journey, and invite them to share their stories and wisdom with the world. My hope is that this podcast contains some information that is vital in your journey, or maybe even shifts something you believe. In this episode, we converse with Pierre Heistein for the final time about his project, Talking to Iran. I'm sure by the end of this, you'll have a new perspective. Enjoy.
I want to divert back to your trip lightly and just ask you, what was, do you think, the most impressionable moment of the entire trip? So I know we went way off the script of questions that I sent you, but this chat was just so intriguing to me, I couldn't escape away from it.
That's fine. I read them once and didn't read them again. Because not to discredit your questions, they were great questions, but I didn't want to come in here scripted either. So this is great. That's a hard question. Nothing stands out because there's so many moments that could have been that moment, but then there were just like other moments, and so can I read to you how the book ends?
Yeah,
would you like that?
Yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah. You know, while we've been doing this podcast, I've just been thinking the whole time. I'm like, all I want to do is just hear this whole story. Like that, each time you tell me a part of this story, I'm so fascinated by it. Like, I'm looking at the rest of my questions now, and I'm just thinking to myself, why? Like this alone, like there's no way at all we could fit this all of these questions into one thing, because they were all about such big, expansive things in your life. And I'm just like, I just want to throw all those questions out now, or at least, circle back and maybe ask you about those other questions later. But yeah, if we can just do a bit more about Iran for the next little while and stick with that, that'd be fantastic.
I want to answer that question about the most impressionable moment just by reading it. It's a paragraph. The book ends in a very short paragraph, but I think it answers your question.
Okay.
In the airplane, I cried. Iran was a person, and over 3 months, I'd gently fallen into a relationship with her. Just as we were getting to know each other, I left. And the day before I did, she embraced me with her quirky smile, her irrational argument. She caressed me with her kindness, and her eyes blazed with soft, warm love that would snap resolute at the slightest unjust provocation. I missed her. How could memory ever do justice to Kazem's generosity or Karim's humility? How could I ever show that Mani's racist banter was his way of dealing with the rawness of his humanity? I was torn away too early. Her eyes looked at me intensely and screamed with frustration. She gave me everything and begged of me things I could not give, and she knew it, and she loved me anyway because she loved. She knew how to love. I don't know how that answers your question, but I feel it does. It was the whole. It was just like this madness of moment and experience and people and diversity, and with every question answered, having 7 more come up. And just, it was this incredible fast track journey into just the complexity of the entire world, and just this realization of, oh my, this is so big. We are so big. We are so complicated and difficult, and we trick ourselves into thinking we can understand, but there's just too much to understand. And maybe we've come full circle. I hadn't thought of this, but right to even before we started talking about the podcast about relationships and how that's kind of the only thing that really makes sense. As much as they in themselves don't really make sense at times, it's having relationships with people and places is like the only thing we can grasp. And I think that for me was the most impressionable moment, was leaving Iran. And I was bawling my eyes out on the airplane. I think it was just this overload of emotion, but it was also this feeling of just like, I now had a relationship with something, with a place, with the people. And probably neither of those. I had a relationship with my experience with those. And it was just, whoa. Yeah, something like that. I just don't really know.
It's something that keeps coming up in my life. It doesn't matter how many times I ask the question of what route you go down to get to it. It seems to be, like you said, that the only important thing worth focusing on, not worth focusing on, but that it is worth the time to focus on, is relationship. If you were to solely focus on your relationship with not just people, but things and places around you for the better, probably everything would be better, I would assume. But it really does come down to just that. And I don't know where to look for information about that, but it keeps coming up as a message. I'd love to understand it better, why that's the case. I'm confused as to why everything else apart from that doesn't matter.
And I would maybe challenge you there about it not mattering. I think at least the balance I found for myself was not discarding everything else, or because I've also toyed about going the other extreme and just focusing on relationships and letting go of all other ambition. And I mean, even stuff like wanting to make the world a better place. I mean, that's a personal ambitious goal. That's not necessarily relationships. And so I've toyed with letting go of that and just focusing on relationships. And I'm not attracted to that, and it doesn't really work for me. And my personal experience with this is that relationships are the only thing that is necessary. It's the only need we have. I mean, sure, eating is really important as well. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. But what would you rather be? Surrounded by food and bitterly lonely, or really hungry and lying there with your best friend? That's a complex question, and I'm very conscious of speaking from a place where my stomach is full.
You actually had that exact experience before, like food and water, and when you and Luke went off down the edge of that valley, right. You guys got stuck down there for a bit. I don't know how hungry you were on that particular occasion, but I know that you guys were low on something.
We were pretty hungry. I think the last 24, 30 hours we had an apple between us, with no certainty that we were going to get out of there. So yes, I guess I can't speak from experience, but I cannot speak from the experience of like chronic hunger and poverty. I feel like that is an important framing, but what I mean by that is like, at least from my lived point of view and from my life context, that is the balance I have found or set out for myself, is recognizing that the human connection and the relations are really the only thing I need. And yes, there are some very basic survival needs, which maybe when you go to the extreme kick in, but hopefully not many of us need to ask that question. What's important is where does everything else fit there? And for me, that has become entertainment. And that has opened up so much freedom in my life. Like, yes, it is really important to me, and it's where most of my other energy is going at the moment, is defining, okay, so I've done all these cool things in my life, and I thought they were cool. They've all been quite diverse. Now, what is my career? Do I have a career? Do I have, that big question, okay?
Yeah.
But even that I face with a sense of, I don't need to answer this. I really, 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 really want to answer this.
Same.
But I don't need to answer this. And that for me is like this immensely liberating feeling of realizing, where is the need? The need is relationships. So build those relationships, nurture those relationships, focus on them, make sure that's there. But it's not to say that's the only thing you need or want. I mean, there are loads of wants in the world that make our lives rich and fantastic things, and they should be pursued and fought for and all of that, But for me, that separating between need and want, that need and entertainment, and it's wonderful to be entertained by projects and ambitions and trips and adventures and all of this stuff. But it's in that box for me, and the only thing in the other box is making sure that I have very real, very open, very loving relationships around me, and a sense of community, however that's defined, whether that's geographically or otherwise.
So that's something that you come to realize with time.
Yeah, time and landing face first in the gravel multiple times in that sense, building that, losing that, ignoring that, seeking that. It's just, yeah.
So you've realized this importance of relationships, more so interpersonal ones, but just to link it all with your trip to Iran and what your journey there was about, your motivations, you're actually the person now creating a relationship between anyone who reads what you're writing and Iran. So you're kind of like a connector. As a journalist, as a book writer, you're a connector. You are connecting people, but you're trying to make a positive connection rather than typical media, which is making a negative connection. But I guess you're not even really trying to, subjectively do it positively. You're just trying to show what you saw. You're just trying to be like eyes on the ground, or you were trying to be eyes on the ground there. And that's what I pick up in your writing. Like when I read that, it just feels like eyes on the ground. It feels like I'm there in the conversations. And I think that alone is enough, like you said, to help people form their own opinions about it, without you pushing an agenda, without you having, you have your lens, but it doesn't seem, as far as I can tell, like, you're picking up through your lens, but not subjectively explaining it to people, which I really love. I'm glad we dived into it a bit further today. I guess I'd love to wrap up that segment about Iran now, because we've been going at it for about an hour and a half now. I guess what I'd like to ask is, what do you think differently about the world now after going to Iran, and what should people know? If there was like one thing that people should know that you'd love people to know, like if your book were summarized into like a paragraph, it was the most essential piece of information condensed into that one paragraph, how would that look?
I'd want them to do a thought experiment. I'd want them to think about the United States, and if they're from there, think about another country, well known, I don't know, England, Australia, wherever you want, Um, think about everything they know about that country and separate it from just what they hear about that country's government. And not even the news, because the news is about other things as well. Just what they hear about that country's government. That is the only information they have. And based on that information, ignoring everything else, it's really hard, try to form an opinion of that country. If all that you heard was foreign news about that country's government, not even foreign news, any news, just about that country's government, what would your impression be of that country? My guess is that if we're talking about the United States, your impression would be pretty horrific. When the United States is, at least in my opinion, not a horrific place, but or people. And we know that because we don't just hear news about their government. We hear a huge range of information about the country and its culture. What I would want people to see, having done that, is that it's very likely, at least this was my case, that my impression of Iran and many other countries around the world was information just about their government. And even if, and it probably is, even if all of that information is true, how much are you missing then? And if it's the one thing that I want the book or the journey to spark, it's not even about Iran. It's about how much understanding is lost when we look at things through only one lens, or through a place, or through information that is only coming from one place. And that place can be an ideology. I'm not just talking about a news source, but it's how much else is out there. How much else is out there? Just that for me is it's what happened to me in this journey. It's, I traveled a lot, but even so, going to Iran, I came back into the rest of the world, if you want to put it like that, going, whoa, just this world is a big place, and there is so much. It's not even, it's easy to say there's so much I don't know. There's so much I don't know about things I'm having opinions about. That's the point. And it's not, again, I don't want to repeat myself, it's not that you shouldn't have opinions, but there's a world behind them that's worthy of exploring. Does that answer your question?
It does. I really enjoyed that. I've just been sitting here just like soaking this up, and yeah, it's one of the first times that I've had all these questions and just felt like doing nothing but forgetting about them and just diving more into
Wonderful.
it. I've recently come across that like people are very captivated by stories as well. I found that whenever there's story involved, we're so interested. We're so, me included, like as soon as there's story involved, that's just the most captivating thing for nearly any human. And I was definitely captivated by your story. I'm looking forward to the rest of the bits coming out. And I do hope, I know I appreciate the time that you spent with me today, but I do hope that we could actually circle back and maybe get to those other things in another one, like later when you have more time, or whenever it is that you do find the time to have it again. I'd love to jump back into this and dive into your Atwell and Elmura project, but I think more with the guise of story. Like I would love to just hear the story of that.
Sure.
Yeah. And
Good story.
Yeah, if possible. But yeah, so just for people listening, you can find Pierre's work at talkingtoiran.com. You probably want to put a www in front of that, I would imagine.
Yeah. Talkingtoiran.com should take you to a landing page where you'll start to see it separated in chapters or sections. And then the same on Instagram, Talking to Iran.
Yeah.
At least.
I mean, people can jump on and follow that now as soon as they find it. Yeah, I got totally lost with this one. Usually I hold to my script really well and guide the conversation, but yeah, that was just something very worth diving into a little deeper and all of its intricacies for sure.
I'm glad. I hope the editing isn't too difficult.
It's going to be an absolute nightmare.
Glad I could help.
But that's okay by me, because it'll be nice to revisit this later. For today, thank you so much for the time you shared with me, and I appreciate that a lot. And there's a few things you said that really captured my interest that weren't about Iran as well. So I'd like to talk to you about those later. In particular, your business column that you worked on, because that's another thing, sort of information that I'm really trying to learn about right now, because I think it's a route that I'm going down. But Pierre, thank you so much for coming onto the show.
This was fun. Enjoyed this.
Thank you for listening to the final part of our interview with Pierre. This is our last week with Pierre, sharing his experience of Iran and its people, though hopefully not our last time with him at all. Let us know what you thought, online or in the comments below. Next, if you're a star, why not leave some for us wherever you're listening and make our night sky dazzle? If you thought that was lame, so is leaving no stars. This genuinely helps us to get discovered by new listeners and is kind of like saying thank you in the podcast world. Thirdly, Between Views is turning 1. Watch this space over the festive period as we celebrate. In other news, Between Views is always looking for collaborators. If you want to join the team or create something together, then please reach out on Instagram. Finally, if you know someone who deserves to be interviewed or just have some feedback, then send us an email at betweenviewsbv@gmail.com or message us on Instagram. Thanks again for an amazing first year of podcasting. I appreciate you all so much, and we will see you very, very soon.